Okay.
Okay, good afternoon, dear participants. Welcome to UBLN and to UBLN Academy. This is our third session in the course Recruitment and Employment. At the previous sessions, we talked about the CV and the interviewing process. And today we have a wonderful opportunity to hear from the recruiter how to find a job for the lawyer. We will listen to his tips and follow his advices. I'm very happy to introduce today our star speaker, Joshua Blake. He is the director at Montresor Legal. Welcome.
Thanks very much, Irina. Good to be presenting today. I will be giving tips on how to find a job as a lawyer. And without further ado, excuse me, let's get started. Just briefly, the contents. So going to be doing an introduction, understanding of the UK legal job market, and preparing for the job search as well, and effective job search strategies, and then how to ace the interview process. And finally, we can have some Q&A after that too. Oh, excuse me. Sorry, I'm not sure I've added subtitles there. I didn't mean to do that. Welcome everyone. Thank you very much for joining. Thank you, Irina, for having me. The objective for today is to provide Ukrainian lawyers with actionable insights on securing legal jobs in the UK. Quick bit of background on Montresor Legal. Montresor has been working in the legal recruitment space for over 10 years. I personally have been in the legal recruitment space myself for 8 years, working to help find lawyers jobs. Sorry, let me just go. Is that slide, is that still on the slideshow, Irina, or has it come out now?
Well, it's introduction now.
Yeah.
Introduction slide there.
Okay. Yeah. So firstly, understanding the UK legal job market. So the legal system is slightly different from Ukraine in the UK, in that it's a common law jurisdiction as opposed to a civil law jurisdiction, which essentially, as I'm sure a lot of you will be aware, means that a lot of precedent is taken from case law as well as statute. Legal professions, there is a dichotomy within legal professions in the UK, so you can either qualify or work as a solicitor or also a barrister. So on the solicitor side, working more to give advice and work on documentation, and then as a barrister to appear in court and to work on more contentious matters. Path to qualification, there's been some guidance recently, as a lot of you will be aware, from the Law Society, allowing Ukrainian lawyers to work as lawyers in the UK as well, whereas before you would have to cross-qualify, do the QLTS or something like that. Now they've made it a lot easier, so there's a link for anyone who's interested in reading a bit more on that there. Practice areas, there are various different practice areas within the UK. Pretty much everything is covered, from corporate, real estate, criminal, immigration, etc. Different law firms will tend to specialize in different areas. I'd say two really useful websites for guidance on this are the Legal 500 and also Chambers and Partners, if you want to read up further on which law firms specialize in which areas. There's also the in-house career path. The UK has one of the biggest legal in-house professions. So roles aren't limited to law firms by any means, and there are hundreds of companies which also have in-house legal positions, so it's worth considering those as well as law firms. Legal tech is something that has become a lot more prevalent in the UK over the last 10 to 15 years. It's definitely a good area to read up on and take an interest in, because quite often there'll be questions around that, or it might be something you can bring up in interviews to help give you an advantage. Networking and professional development, this plays a key part within the UK legal profession, and is the reason why things like UBLN exist. Networking is a great way to meet with people, understand more about the market, and to help your own development over time. Legal regulations, in the UK, we are, as a legal profession, regulated by, on the solicitor side, the SRA, and on the barrister side, the BSB. Worth knowing a little bit more about those and reading into them if you're interested to know how the legal market is regulated. Diversity and inclusion is quite at the forefront of a lot of people's minds in the legal profession at the moment. It's something that people have noted has been slightly lagging behind over the years, and a lot of law firms and in-house legal teams are looking to diversify the talent that they bring in. It's something that can be brought up in interview by your interviewers, or something that you might also want to mention when it comes to sort of looking at roles and prospective employers. Preparing for the job search, legal qualifications and requirements. As we touched on in the last slide, Ukrainian lawyers have been sort of looked at specifically by the Law Society given recent events. So there isn't currently a need to cross-qualify. But just so you're aware, if you're working as a lawyer in the UK, traditionally you do a 2-year training contracts at a law firm or in-house, where you do 4 6-month rotations in different seats, so within different practice areas. That's been the main way. There's also been the SQE test brought in recently, which is worth doing some reading up on, which allows people to just gain 2 years experience as a legal professional, and then they can qualify via that route. And previously there's been the SILEX route as well, if anyone's interested in reading up a bit further on those, but I think not worth spending too much time on given the recent Law Society guidelines. Language proficiency and cultural adaptation, we'll go through on a slide in a moment, and also hopefully not covering too much old ground, but a reminder on CVs and cover letters as well, maybe encroaching a little bit on the last presentation, but hopefully some new useful information there. Language proficiency and cultural adaptation. So I think language is key, of course, to the job search. Being able to speak, read, and write fluently in English is always going to be very useful. There are several ways of doing this, and now a lot of apps and things on your phone that are useful. You can, even just watching sort of movies and Netflix in English language and picking up on different kinds of dialects and nuances within a language is going to be useful. Things like online courses, and potentially even the use of a tutor, or even just making friends in the UK and meeting up with people who are English native speakers is going to be a good way at improving language skills. I'd also recommend reading some legal text, or even some textbooks to help get your head around the vocabulary used within legal writing, which is going to be useful for interviews and applications too. On the networking side, as we mentioned, it's really important to go out and meet with people within the legal profession. And that can be done through the Law Society, looking at events that are published on LinkedIn or in different publications to find opportunities to go and meet people. It's really important, especially in a post-COVID world. There's often less emphasis on sort of meeting people and networking, but it's more important than ever to go out and make those connections and learn from other people, potentially getting things like mentors or just people you can speak with and learn from about the UK legal market. There was an event we went to, myself and Irina, a few weeks back at her law firm, Gately, things like that. I think it was really useful to be able to speak to people who are looking for roles in the UK, and hopefully useful for them to pick people's brains on how best to go about that. So I think the networking part is crucial. Online, there are various different resources online. There are some legal press. There's some legal press that is going to be useful to take a look at. So things like The Lawyer, I would recommend. And then for a slightly different spin on it, things like Roll on Friday or Legal Cheek can be quite a good way to understand the market and what people are thinking and what kind of relevant press there is in the legal market at the moment. Also, on the cultural side, again, really important to meet with people and pick up on the cultural nuances that form the UK market and language. That's going to be really useful to improve upon and to generally understand. Legal knowledge goes back to sort of finding textbooks and reading around maybe different cases or case law. So websites like LexisNexis and Westlaw, for example, are really good places to read up on cases and to understand decision making and to, again, pick up on the vernacular used within the legal sphere. Open mind. I think it's really important to keep an open mind. There may be with people coming from any different jurisdiction or country, there are certain ways of maybe doing things or certain habits that people pick up. I think it's just good to remember to keep an open mind and be willing to consider new ideas and new ways of doing things. So within all those, you'll hopefully pick up some tips on how to make sure that the language and cultural adaptation is there. Writing a CV, these are some sort of tips to follow. Personal information, just be sure to include your name, address, and email on the CV, as well as telephone number, so that people can contact you. Don't need to include a photo within that. We suggest always doing a professional summary, which briefly outlines what's good about you, why should the firm or in-house sort of role consider you. Education in reverse chronological order, listing back the things that you've done from your sort of most recent qualifications to your degree to your high school education. Making sure to include legal qualifications, where you're qualified, under which body you got qualified. Work experience, again, in reverse chronological order, running through what you've done most recently and working your way back, being sure to keep in detail around the practice areas, type of cases you worked on or types of documentation that you worked on will be really important too. Practice areas, making sure to list the areas that you've worked in. Quite often there will be a keyword search done by someone in HR or maybe even someone less experienced in a recruitment business. So make sure that everything you've done is listed in detail within each practice area. Make sure to include all the skills that you've picked up, anything from IT to advocacy, debating, running meetings, giving presentations, presentations, all things that people will be interested in when they consider your CV. Listing any languages and at what level the proficiency is to, especially useful if you've moved to the UK, to make it clear what your level of English is and why it's at that level. Professional memberships, good to include those. Also to add any publications or presentations that you've worked on in the past. It can be an interesting read and can sometimes differentiate candidates, and particularly if the publication is in an area that's relevant to the firm or business you're applying to. References, good to have some ready. It's fine to just say that they are available on request, and just make sure that your referees know that they will be contacted beforehand. Formatting, given you're applying to legal roles, it's really important to be precise and have the formatting spot on, and no different sort of fonts or sizes or spacing, because these are things that lawyers will often pick up on. Tailoring, I think it's always good to make sure that your CV is tailored to a particular role. So if there's some things you can draw out, some more corporate experience for a corporate role, or more contentious experience for a litigation role, then definitely consider making some small amendments each time before you send the CV across. Length, recommend no longer than 2 pages. It doesn't need to be War and Peace. No one should be sort of 5 pages plus, but if you can keep it around 2, that's generally a good length to have a chance to put down all your experience, but also give the reader a chance to not be overwhelmed by it. Proofreading, read it twice, 3 times, 4 times before sending. Get someone else to take a look at it as well, who you trust to give some critique, because again, really with lawyers, we don't want to be making any mistakes. When it comes to a cover letter, format and structure, so it's a bit more, hence the name, it's a bit more of a letter. So you'll put your name and address in the top right, and then write it more as if you are writing a letter. Give a good introduction, be clear about why you're applying for that role, what particularly interests you about it. Being sure to highlight all of the relevant skills, so making it very specific to the job. What have you done that's similar to what that role requires? Outline the key skills, legal expertise and qualifications that match up with the position that you are applying to. Cultural adaptation, as we discussed, we'll talk a little bit about your move to the UK, why you're interested in the UK legal market, what you've done to upskill on UK law, whether it's educational or work experience or events that you've been to. I think it's really important to add something around how you are adapting in the UK and what you've done that's relevant to your application. Education and qualifications, again, making it clear why you're qualified for the role, highlighting any impressive academics that are noteworthy, and to make sure that you are top of the pile when it comes to the application process. Work experience, picking out some relevant things, again, as we said, to make sure that it's clear what you've done matches up with what the role itself requires. Cultural fit and language skills, how you're adapting to sort of English law, English speaking, and what you've done around that. Motivation and fit, always making sure to talk about why a role is suitable for you, why you feel it's suitable for you, and what makes it a good fit with your own ambitions and what you're looking to do in the UK. And then closing off with a concluding paragraph, and finally signature, which can not many people handwrite cover letters these days, but that can be something like an e-signature is fine for that as well. Being sure to mention any attachments, for example, your CV, which you'll be sending across with the cover letter. And again, the key here is to proofread and make sure that what you're sending out is fit to be reviewed by a lawyer or partner or whoever's on the receiving end of your application. Effective job search strategies. So we're going to be looking now at online resources that are available, taking another look at networking and professional associations, and finally utilizing recruitment companies like Montresor to assist in your search. Here I've listed a few relevant websites that you can look at. So Tosi Legal is a really good one. Essentially a jobs board where various different agencies will put up jobs or advertise jobs, but also a lot of employers will do so directly. Also have a Law Society Gazette, which is the official Law Society jobs board, another useful one to take a look at. And they've got lots of listings. I had a check this morning, lots of listings over the past couple of weeks. So that's renewed daily. Simply Law Jobs is another good one to take a look at. Then Legal Week you have as well. The Lawyer Guardian Jobs the Guardian Jobs in the legal section is also useful. Where I think we all see a lot of advertisements these days is on LinkedIn. It seems to be the main place for people to go and advertise their jobs, particularly when companies want to advertise directly. A lot of that is done through LinkedIn. So what I'd suggest for all of these is to set up an account with them and turn on notifications so that you get notified whenever a job is added which fits with your experience or what you're looking for. So yeah, just create a search on those and get sent through the different adverts each day, so you're able to stay on top of your application process. Networking and professional associations, attending events and things like webinars is always going to be highly useful when thinking about applying. So there's various different events and webinars going on. It's good to check on LinkedIn to see some relevant things that could be happening, again through the Law Society website as well, or just through your own network, keeping abreast of different things that are happening and making sure to attend where you can. Legal associations, again, sort of SRA, there are regular events and webinars, track them on their website and on LinkedIn, but also look at other things that are of interest. Whether it's, there'll be different events and webinars for things like corporate law or family law or whatever else. So keep in mind to keep searching for those and checking on pages that are linked with what you do or are looking to do. And I think the main thing here is persistence. You're not going to go to one event and one webinar and pick up the dream job. I think it's important to keep your name out there, keep your brand out there, keep on going with the search, looking online and joining in with networking events. And eventually you'll start to unlock some doors and some opportunities. So persistence is always, with all of this, is key. Utilizing recruitment companies. So I think one thing, I think it's something that's really important to be able to do, to lean on legal recruitment agencies in the UK, because they'll help provide you with potential openings, but also with insights as well. Before doing that, I think it's worth doing your research, take a look at, which agencies are out there. Are there particular agencies that are good for certain roles? or that work with particular clients that would be of interest to me. What are their reviews like? What's their website like? Have a look online and see, what's going to work best for you. Because ideally, you probably want to speak with, depending on what you're looking for, between 3 and 5, I think is a good number. You probably don't want to spread so thin that you lose track of where you're applying and who you've spoken with. But also, you might not want to just speak to 1 or 2 agencies because they may not cover all of the ground that you would like to be covered. So do your research there. Contacts should be pretty easy to contact any recruitment agency. There'll be contact details listed on the website or on LinkedIn, or even on some people's profiles, they'll have a number or an email. So very easy to get in touch. Most agencies will offer some kind of consultation. So most likely an initial call or sometimes a meeting, either on Zoom, Teams, or in person. This can be a good chance to gain a better understanding of the legal landscape more generally, but also to ask questions specifically about the kind of clients or the kind of corporations that an agency is working with, what kind of practice areas they tend to deal with. Things like what kind of salary can you expect? What kind of opportunities are out there? How quickly do you need to be available? Or how does it work if it's a temporary role, for example? Are you paid by the agency, or are you paid by the end user or client, or law firm or corporate? So yeah, really good opportunity there with agencies to get a better understanding of the market and specifically tailored advice to you. Interview preparation, another thing the agency should be able to help you with, if and when you're able to get an interview, helping you to prepare for that interview, giving you inside knowledge on the firm, the corporate, on the people who are interviewing, on the type of interview that's likely to be conducted, and also on the kinds of questions that maybe come up before, if they've got experience of working with that place previously. They'll be able to give some good tailored advice to you on how best to prepare and answer any questions that do come up. And on the feedback side of things, they'll be able to collect your feedback and give that back to the place that you are applying to make sure that to put your best foot forwards and get that over in a way that's going to be helpful to you in the process, and then also to feed back to you, whether it's positive or even negative. It's good to have someone to digest that information and feed it back to you, so that it helps either in your future job search or when you move into the next round, to help prepare for that if there were any shortcomings, or if there's anything to emphasize again, which the interviewer particularly liked first time around. Negotiation offer. A good thing about going through a recruitment agency is they're able to negotiate on your behalf. Sometimes it can be difficult to do this by yourself, particularly if it's something you're less well versed in, or maybe you had a job for 7-8 years and this is the first time you've moved. It's easy to forget kind of negotiation tactics and how best to make sure to negotiate and get the best possible offer. So this is something that a recruitment agency should be able to help you out with. Acceptance and onboarding, another thing that the agents should be able to help you with once you've accepted, signing the paperwork, explaining anything within the contract that needs explaining, and then also with the onboarding process, particularly relevant if it's something like a temporary role where maybe you need to be given, a laptop or a phone, or they need to make sure that your referencing gets done in good time so that you can start the role. It's quite useful to have that kind of support. And also on the follow-up side of things, if you haven't had feedback or want to understand what the next steps are, you've got someone who's there to provide that and make sure to follow up and get that for you. Acing the interview process. So we'll take a look at how we can understand the interview structure, take a look at preparing for interviews, and another look at cultural fit and soft skills. There are various different kinds of interviews, so structured interviews where you'll be going through various different bits and pieces as part of the process. So looking at maybe some legal questions and also some competency-based interviews as well can be something that comes up. So using the STAR principle, situation, task, action, result, and to talk about your competencies and what you've done previously. Case study interviews, quite self-explanatory, but often there'll be sort of looking at maybe a document or a situation and talking about how you would deal with the legal aspects of that. It can be something like a markup or like a corporate transaction, or it could be something along the lines of looking at a case if it's within litigation and talking about what advice you'd give to the client based on a certain set of facts. Panel interviews, sometimes there can be several people sitting in on that. It can be partnered, associates, HR. It's good to be prepared to be sat in front of a panel. Some interviews can be quite technical, so looking almost solely at the particular area of law that you're interviewing for. So it's helpful to be prepared for those technical interviews, to think about your particular practice area, what's happened in that area recently, or to go over different cases or documents that you've worked on before and be able to talk through those concisely. Behavioral interviews, sometimes people will be looking at your behaviors and using those to judge how you might behave in the future. So a bit more on the sort of softer side of things, but something that it's rarely a first stage or the main stage, but can play a part within an interview process, particularly towards the latter stages. Presentation or group exercises, a bit less common in the legal world, but still something that does come up. You can be asked to give a presentation, or they might want to see how you work as part of a team. So working together with other applicants to solve a problem or to give a presentation sometimes can come up. Situational judgment tests, based on the situation, what would you do in response to that? And so again, sort of looking at how you respond to certain situations and what you will do potentially under pressure or in a law firm or in-house legal team environment. Networking and informal conversations. Another one that comes up a bit later on in the process generally, but there may be a lunch or a coffee or something where they want to gauge, how does this person fit in? Are they a good cultural fit? Is this someone we could work with day to day? Is this someone that would be good to have in the office and as a member of the team more generally? And finally, assessment centers. Again, something not so prevalent in the legal sphere unless it's at the more junior level. So this is something that a lot of law firms will do for things like training contracts, and there'll be groups of people going in and essentially competing for a role against others, and do sometimes see it in more senior roles than than that. But this is something where you'll be looking at how you respond in a competitive environment up against others, and how you think, largely how you think on your feet. Preparing for the interviews, a big part of that is going to be researching where you are applying to. It's really important to be able to say really why you want to work there, and that stems from understanding what kind of firm it is, what are they good at, what have they done that's in the news recently, why have you picked them out as somewhere that you want to apply to. So that's always going to be the number one bit of research to do. Know your CV. It's really important, even though you wrote it and know your background, to actually read through it in order a couple of times before you go in for your interview. You want to be able to pick out things that are relevant to the role, but also you don't want to be caught out if they ask you a question about something that you did on page 3 in 2005. You want to be able to know kind of what you've said and be able to talk about it in a bit more detail if your interviewer picks it out as something to talk more about. Legal knowledge, make sure to have a read and revise on the particular practice area or areas of law that you'll cover. Or even if it's something you've done for several years, always good to have a refresher on it and check that nothing has changed or nothing is particularly different in the UK as it is to Ukraine, for example. Behavioral questions, always ready with some examples about times you've had to deal with a difficult person or a stressful situation or under time pressure, because you're almost guaranteed to get a couple of those questions at some point in the process, whether it's from a lawyer or quite typically part of the HR side of the interview process. Commercial awareness. A lot of firms and in-house teams will want to feel comfortable that you understand the legal landscape as it is right now and have done your reading, whether it's reading the Financial Times or The Lawyer I mentioned before is another good one. Making sure to stay on top of legal press, but also the news more generally, things like inflation and other macro level economics that are affecting the market at the moment, because quite often these will transfer into different practice areas in firms in different ways, or they'll be affecting the company if it's an in-house role that you are applying to. So you want to make sure you know what's happening on a macro level so that you can then use it to speak about the more micro level. And for example, if it's a financial services institution that you're applying to or interviewing with, knowing why there might be certain things happening within that team. If it's a lending team, for example, how interest rates might be affecting that, or if it's a corporate team, how many IPOs have there been recently, or has there been much merger activity? What have they been involved with there? So a lot of the time it's good to have some general commercial awareness and some things applicable to the role you're applying to. Case scenarios as well, being prepared to work on a case study, so making sure you understand the practice area and what's been happening in it most recently, and being able to apply that to case studies. Worth trying to find some online or speak to people that have done them previously to help guide you on that. Always have some questions for the interviewer. 9 times out of 10 in any interview, you'll be asked at the end, do you have any questions for us? Best to be prepared on that. It shows that you care about the role, that you're interested in it, and that you've put some real thought in. So don't try and come up with those on the spot. It's best to have something or a couple prepared that you're able to ask throughout or at the end of the interview when given the chance. Professional attire and demeanor. This is something you'll want to get a steer on either from the internal recruitment team or the recruiter, depending on how you've applied to the position, because it will vary from place to place. It's best to be safe on this and go smarter rather than more casual. But try to get an understanding before you go in so that you can hit the right pitch, because for some in-house roles, for example, it may be quite common to be in a t-shirt or a jumper in the office, and with some law firms you may be expected to be in a shirt and tie if male, or a dress for females, or whatever else. There may be a policy, or there may just be a loose kind of, this is what we do here type thing. So it's good to get a gauge on that before you go in, so that you don't feel blindsided by being dressed completely differently to your interviewer. Confidence and clarity, being sure to sort of hold yourself in a confident way, maintain eye contact, a good handshake at the beginning. These kind of things make up the first impression that you give, which is always very difficult to then move someone away from their first impression. So you want that to be very strong: handshake, eye contact, and be confident in the way that you go into that. Then we also have the cultural fit piece. Gain an understanding of what it's like to work there. What have different people said? Can you get hold of someone who works in the organization before your interview to understand what the culture is like? Because if it's somewhere that is, super high performance, long hours, you want to know that beforehand, because one, it might not be for you, but two, if it is for you, you want to be able to say that and to get that across. Or if it's very much a work-life balance firm, 9 to 5, everyone leaves bang on 5, then you want to know that as well, because there's no point going into that interview saying, I'm happy to work 20 hours a week, because it's not the right kind of cultural fit for you. So just be aware of that and be able to talk about it as part of the interview process. Mock interviews, always recommend going through a mock interview with a friend or a colleague, preferably someone else within the legal profession, but it can even just be a family member to help pick up on small tics or different things you may be doing that you're not aware of. And just to be able to hear yourself speaking out loud can sometimes be fine if it is someone like a family member or friend. But if you can get someone in the legal background, that's perfect. Then you can run through, the kind of questions that you expect, and get used to answering those questions and having someone in front of you when you do it. It's easy to think that practicing by yourself or just thinking about answers is useful preparation, but until you do it out loud, it is quite difficult to emulate what that can be like. So I really recommend doing some mock interviews beforehand. Time management. Make sure to be concise with your answers and to give enough time throughout the process. You don't want to give particularly long-winded or lofty answers to simple legal questions. It's best to answer it and then move on, and you give yourself more chance to answer more questions and continue to show how good you are, rather than spending too much time on an answer, particularly if it can be given more simply. And often, particularly with in-house roles, for example, you want to be able to give concise answers to people and not be beating around the bush, so to speak. Finally, following up, either if it's a direct application, following up with the internal recruitment person or with HR, or even with the partner or head of legal who's interviewed you, just to say, thank you for the interview, look forward to hearing back, let me know next steps or something like that. Or if it's through a recruitment agency, following up with them and making sure they get you either some kind of feedback or an understanding of how the process is going to progress. So yeah, that's everything on the general sort of tips to applying for legal roles in the UK. If anyone has any questions, please let me know.
I have a question.
Hi, Daria. Sure.
My name is Daria Petrovets. Nice to meet you. I'm from Odessa, but now I'm in Amsterdam. And I try to find the work. It's not successful for now, but how it's popular that somebody from UK can take on remote or half-time the lawyer from, for example, from Amsterdam, and how it's let's tell, can be managed. I mean, I have now my status in Netherlands, but again, not my search is not successful, and I started studying international commercial law in University of Salford, UK.
Okay.
So, and I'm not sure that maybe I should relocate my search to UK, not in Amsterdam.
So was the question, how possible is it to work remotely in Amsterdam for a UK business?
Yes, so basically, yes.
Okay. Yes, the difficulty with that can be largely around employment laws, and where that person would be working and what kind of laws they would be governed by, and also with the tax implications as well, because there are different jurisdictions, there's different tax rules that apply, and UK-based companies will want to make sure that they apply those sort of in the right way. And if someone's not domiciled in the UK, there can be complications and difficulties with being based overseas. So really, if you're wanting to work with a UK-based company, you would be best to be based in the UK. Otherwise, if it's in the Netherlands, then it'd be best to apply for roles there. Generally, it's a lot easier within the country that you're living to make applications.
Okay, so it's not so much popular to take somebody like from Netherlands. So it's not really a realistic story, right?
I'd say so, because unless it was really a difficult position to fill, there would probably be people based in the UK that might be able to do it, and there wouldn't be as many hoops to jump through, because it's quite a difficult thing to hire someone who would be working in another country.
But if it's part-time, for example, like 1 week there, 1 week not, or it's not for lawyer job, I mean, it's not so much for like our kind of type of job to be partly in UK.
I'd say it's very rare. Yeah, I'm afraid.
Can I answer this question? I would say that it's not realistic, Daria, as you said. It's very realistic, although, as Josh said, that it's a problem. I can share my story because I got my temporary contract, my first UK temporary contract, while I relocated to Poland when the war has started in Ukraine. So I was employed by European company, but Ukrainian office. This Polish company, it relocated me to Poland. And from Poland, I got a few interviews in the UK, and I got a job offer. However, it's really very difficult because in our society, UBLN society, there are many lawyers who are looking for a job and who are in the UK, and they simply can't find the job. So I would say that you keep trying, but just it's not that easy. I totally agree here with Josh.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, I have a question as well. My name is Natalia. I'm from Plymouth, Devon, UK. I have some question about relevant experience for lawyers. a majority Ukrainian lawyers who came to the UK are experienced person. For example, I have about 20 years experience, and now I'm looking for a entry-level job like paralegal or legal assistant. And as for me, is for recruiters look strange when a person with a huge experience is looking for an entry-level job. And I tried to find a job, and so I removed all my Ukrainian experience and kept only conversion. I finished the conversion course in the UK, set the SQ1 exam, and so I applied for the role as a graduate student, like a majority of person in the UK, because a paralegal, a legal assistant is generally speaking as a graduated student. And I suppose in this case for me is a faster to find a job. Do you agree with me? Is the first question.
Do I agree that you should be applying for junior and graduate level jobs? Is that the question?
My question is it correct to remove all Ukrainian experience from CV? Because it's not relevant experience, is experience in a civil jurisdiction, not in a common law. And so I think I look strange when recruiters reviews my CV. I have a 20 years experience and apply for paralegal job. It's strange.
Yeah. I definitely wouldn't get rid of the experience. I don't think it's useless. I think there'll be some really interesting work that you've done that you can draw out. I think it is quite an annoying situation to find yourself in, because, technically you will be overqualified for a lot of those roles, but at the same time, you may be struggling to get a qualified position. I'd say I think it is worth applying for those more junior positions so that you can get a foot in with a business or a law firm in the UK. So I think you're doing the right thing, but I don't think I would get rid of that experience. And hopefully once you are able to get into a position, you'll very quickly sort of rise up the ranks, either internally or with your next move, once you've been able to get that first UK position. But I have spoken to a couple of people in a similar situation, introduced by Irina, or that I've met through UBLN, and I understand it's quite a frustrating start to a career in the UK. But I'd say persistence is crucial, and keep on applying to things. Don't take off any experience, because you want to be able to speak about what you've done, and it will be useful to someone. It also just so happens it's been a particularly quiet year this year, given the macroeconomic climate. So it is particularly a particularly difficult environment to be applying to roles in, but don't let that put you off. And I think, as I said, your experience will be useful, so keep that on your CV.
Okay.
If possible, I would comment as well, and just to with this comment, I would just ask Josh a question. I totally agree with Josh that you must not exclude your work experience, because it's not only about your hard skills, but it's also about your soft skills. And even if you have some gaps in your hard skills, like all Ukrainians, right? Majority of Ukrainians, because we're talking about different legal system, but it doesn't mean that you don't have that your soft skills do not prevail over the soft skills that British lawyers have. So definitely you need to leave it. However, Josh, do you understand, right, that in this case, Natalia and all other overqualified lawyers, they can put into cover letter some explanations why they apply to the position that is below the ones that they had in Ukraine.
Okay, thank you. And the second question is it possible to find absolutely a remote legal job? This question is I ask because really no legal vacancies in Devon. So I applied for 5 vacancies through the last months, no vacancies. And for me, it's very expensive to travel to London, for example, every week. I need 5 hours to get to London, and there is, or it's not realistic scenario to find a remote job in legal sphere.
That is fair enough. I think there are remote positions, and the situation is slightly different, of course, to Darius, and he was asking about working in a different jurisdiction. If you're based in the UK, yes, there are remote roles. They aren't as frequent as roles which would be asking for a hybrid working model. That is the way that a lot of places are doing it. And there is an expectation to be going in sort of 2-3 days a week in a lot of cases. That's not to say it doesn't happen, and particularly if it's something like document review, for example, people can be a lot more open to it getting done remotely, but unfortunately you would be slightly limiting your chances if you are only open to remote roles. Then on the other hand, I can see why obviously a commute from Devon is not realistic. So for that reason, you would need to be able to be looking at the majority remote roles. I mean, there may even be some things around the Southwest and some law firms that you could have applied to directly. It may be worth reaching out to any places locally just to ask if they could use some assistance or might need someone in the coming months, because sometimes places won't know what's out there, or they won't be directly advertising, but they may be thinking of making a hire, or it might just be well timed. So I would consider doing that, because if on the inverse someone was asking us, who do you know?
Oh,
Josh?
something.
Yeah. Okay, while we are waiting for Josh, I'd like to comment also on this. Sorry for this, even though I'm not a speaker today. But I heard that there are some legal platforms, and they provide not permanent contracts for the lawyers, but they provide some work on projects. So if the client gives them a project, for example, review of the contract, you may apply for that project. And if the partner of the law firm, of that platform, legal platform, chooses your CV, he may give you this project. So that means that you may stay at home and you may do this work on distance. It's just the thing to find those legal platforms. And as far as I know, they conclude employment contracts with you, but within that particular project.
Yes, thank you for your answer. But I thought a lot about this, about remote job, and understand the closed city with a lot of legal jobs is Bristol and London, and I will spend half of salary for traveling to Bristol or London, and so
yes, but there is also the practice that you agree with your employer that you arrive to office like once per week, so it's not that bad.
Okay. We'll sort it. Thank you.
Yeah, because in my experience, my colleagues at my previous work, I had such cases when the person arrived to the office once per week, and she lives very far from the office, like in other city like you do. Josh, you're back.
Oh, sorry. I didn't see the warning sign there on the when I was sharing my screen. But my laptop died. Sorry. Yeah. So I was just saying to Natalia that on the inverse, if someone was asking us for a lawyer or a paralegal in Devon, we would probably quite struggle to find someone. There wouldn't be that many people in that area. So I think you should be proactive in your instance in applying to things locally and see if there's anything that you can do in the surrounding areas. Otherwise, yeah, it'll have to be a remote search for now.
Josh, but here also while you, I'm sorry, was absent, I had my 5 penny.
Okay, yeah, go on.
So sorry for this. I told that I know that there are some legal platforms like recruiting agencies, but legal platforms that provide the work based on the projects. So they have clients who are not permanent, but for example, the client needs to review the contract or to draft the contract. So they submit these projects on the platform, and then the partner chooses between the CVs that he has in his profile, and then says, okay, Natalia, Irina, or Josh, you can take this job. So that means that Natalia can work on distance.
Yeah, that does happen. I think
but that doesn't mean that she will get the permanent contract. She will get the temporary contract, particular to this project.
Yeah, there can be projects. It's worth doing some research into those and different ways of ad hoc or remote working. Like I said, so I know from our perspective, there's been a few document review roles that we've had that have been remote. So it definitely does happen. It's just, it probably makes up around sort of 10 to 15% of the amount of roles that we as an agency work on. But yeah, Irina's right. There are others that you specialize more in sort of project or short-term work, in which case it'd be worth looking into those.
Also have a question. What do you think about internship? Is it the way to start? Because as I understand that everybody here in Europe Union area not only start from kind of internship, first of all.
Yeah, I think that can be a good way of getting a foot in the door, because I mean, for one thing, it could lead to something longer term with that particular firm, but also it could be good experience to put on your CV for applications in the future. I think the only thing to be mindful of with the internships, they vary in the kind of level of work that you'd be doing or the kind of level of person you'd be taking on. There are some firms, WilmerHale, for example, like a top US law firm, they do an arbitration internship, which is mainly done by overseas qualified lawyers, but you get other internship, and they're doing legal work, but you get other internships where, you know, people are kind of photocopying for a week. So it really depends on where it is, what the duties are. So do a bit of research on it before committing. Some internships, they'll only be looking for people who are recent graduates or even maybe still at university. But other internships, yeah, they might be considering people who are already along their career journey rather than right at the beginning of it. So it's a bit of a flaky answer, but it's yes and no. Yes, I think it is good in general, but no to some internships because they'll just be too junior.
Yes, I'm now studying, so maybe it can be way for me, not first my education already. So now I study second education in UK, because before it was in Ukraine, and
that's a good idea.
Obviously different.
Yeah, because especially you asked earlier about can I do 1 week here, 1 week there, etc. And internships usually a week, 2 weeks, maybe longest a month. So that is actually an example of where you could come to the UK for a week or two and then go back. So actually, you kind of answered your own question better than I did.
But then second question: how is about remote internship? In the best case.
Well, if like 3 years ago, I would have said that's impossible, but actually, again, post-COVID, it's something that we are seeing virtual internships. A lot of law firms are doing it. Again, it's probably something a bit more junior that they do, like a virtual sort of 1 day in the life of a lawyer or 1 day kind of internship looking in type thing. So I know it's been done. Whether there are places that are doing, you know, a week or 2 weeks fully remote, I'm not actually too sure. So I should caveat all this with the fact that we would very rarely be involved in internships or helping with something like that. We tend to be working on, you know, more full-time roles. A lot of internships will be done directly. So I wouldn't say that I'm an expert in internships. I can only give my kind of 2 cents on what I've seen on people's CVs and from conversations I've had previously. So I think it is a good route, but I'm not sure if I'm not sure how many are done remotely at the moment.
Okay, thank you.
That's okay.
Josh, I have questions. List of questions.
Okay.
If there is a notice in the vacancy that they are looking for, sorry, I'm going to mute our participants, sorry for this, that they are looking for the lawyer with qualifications, with the UK qualifications. Does it mean that if I do not have qualifications, I should not apply to this position? As I hear a lot of comments that I should apply even if it is said that the employer is looking for the lawyer with qualifications, as sometimes this is just a requirement, and sometimes just they may like your CV and call you for the interview.
Yeah, that is weirdly, that is a tricky question, even though it shouldn't be, because it should be black and white. If it says UK qualified, you think you should be UK qualified. However, a lot of the time that's put on a job description just because they've either copied it from somewhere else or they've used it before, or the line manager has said to say it's an HR person or an internal recruitment person. They've said, yeah, UK qualified lawyer, and not really thought about it. Whereas they might actually be considering people who are overseas qualified. So I'd say for those, it probably is worth still applying. Particularly if it's a fairly light touch process. If someone says they're looking for a UK qualified lawyer, I wouldn't spend 3 days writing the perfect cover letter. But if it's quite an easy thing to be able to apply to, I do think it's still worth applying, because a lot of the time they don't actually mean that they're looking for a UK qualified lawyer, but they just put it in as a matter of course. So yeah, it's a bit tricky, because at other times, they will just need someone who's UK qualified, but it's difficult to be able to tell. If it's through an agency, you can just ask them, and that's easier. If it's direct, try and ask, the recruitment team or HR, does this definitely, would I need to definitely be UK qualified, or can I do it? Is this role open to overseas qualified people? So yeah, it maybe try and check, but if you can't check, I would apply rather than ignore it or be put off by that.
At the beginning, you said that language is very important, and it's absolutely true. You said that a person needs to read and watch movies, maybe to communicate, but then it's also a tricky thing that communication at the events, reading books, watching movies is not enough, because you need to practice legal English. And then it becomes like stopping thing, because when you go to the interview and just say, okay, I can communicate, or I have level B, it's not that good, but please, you can give me a chance. So can you please give me a job, not maybe counsel or general counsel,
Yeah.
for a solicitor, right? But give me some paralegal. How to convince a recruiter, in-house recruiter, or recruiter from the recruiting agency, that they give you a green light with your language, even though it's level B, and you're practicing it. Because again, coming back to the beginning of my passion, we need to practice English, legal English. And let's be frank, even if we live 20, 30 years in the UK, we will never be British native speaker.
Yeah, that's fair enough. I think that goes back to what Natalia was saying about maybe for some people starting at a more junior role than they've had previously in the Ukraine is a good point, because you're not going to be required to be, quickly able to give advice using legalese if you are in a paralegal role or a legal assistant role. You'd have the ability to pick things up, to do a bit of research, and be expected to go away and find things out before giving an answer, rather than being relied on to know things off the cuff, and to be able to read and digest long, complicated legal documentation. So I'd say from that standpoint, as long as the role you're coming in at is at a level where you're not required to be giving specific legal jargon advice, then you should
but
be.
how to convince that you deserve to get at least paralegal job? Should I say, okay, I can draft contracts for you, or I can provide you a legal consultancy? So what should I do in order to convince the recruiter to give me not even the middle level position, but junior position?
Yeah, I think it's drawing on experience that you have before that's relevant. Different things that you've done in a previous law firm or in-house role that is still going to be relevant or useful. Being able to communicate in person, being able to negotiate, being able to persuade. These are skills that don't necessarily need really good written legal communication skills, but skills that can still be transferable to a role. And things like research or bundling or reviewing documents. These are examples of skills that a lot of Ukrainian lawyers I've spoken to have, that they can use in the UK before they are sort of top class with their legal English.
Okay. Events, networking. I do believe, and I'm purely convinced, but to say that networking is very important, especially for the refugees, because I think that online platforms, they do not work in terms of getting a job, but networking, it gives like 90% chance that you may get a job through communication. But that is the question. For example, UBLN makes an offline event, and we have recruiters, we have people from business, from the world of business. And for example, I'm looking for a job. What should I do? Should I bring like 100 pages, 100 CVs with me, and then just to give these CVs to the recruiter? So how should I anticipate with people at networking events or any professional events? How should I say that here I am, I'm looking for a job?
Yeah, well, I think in the same way that we first spoke, Irina, it's you need to put yourself out there and engage people in conversations. And the 3 or 4 lawyers that I've spoken to, Ukrainian lawyers I've spoken to since the last event, were people who came up and said, I'm looking for a job. Can I add you on LinkedIn? Or we exchanged numbers and then arranged to speak afterwards. So I think it is a case of being bold with it and going and speaking to people and making it known that you're looking and arranging to speak outside of that, because it's not very useful to go to a networking event and not speak to anyone, or only speak to people that or came with. there has to be an element of going out there and putting yourself out there, and no one's going to be upset by that or bothered by it or put out by it, because everyone's also there to do a similar thing. So I think the most important thing is to just be clear with kind of what you're looking for and what the action points will be off the back of that conversation.
So if I come up to you and say, hey, I'm looking for a job, that doesn't mean that they've answered. That doesn't mean that I'm going to be nasty, right?
Yeah, definitely. No, I think it was, no, we had a good conversation with the people I spoke with from the last event, tried to give some advice and guidance, and we'll work together in the future. So yeah, I think it can only be positive.
Great. My next question is about LinkedIn. As I said, I don't believe that for Ukrainian lawyers, online platforms, including LinkedIn, is successful in terms of finding the job. At least I don't know, unfortunately, any Ukrainian lawyer who has found a job through LinkedIn platform. So my question is, should lawyer care about their page at LinkedIn if he can't find a job there? Or how this lawyer has to become a target of position?
Yeah, LinkedIn is a difficult one because it's so easy to apply on there that it's just with the click of a button. So often jobs that are posted on there do have hundreds of applications. And a lot of the time it's businesses who are hiring directly. So it's probably getting filtered by someone in the recruitment team or the HR team who most likely doesn't have a legal background. And so a lot of people will get missed, and it comes down to keywords or being UK qualified or having a business or a law firm that someone recognizes on it. So it is difficult, and I have heard a lot of people, complaining that their CV goes into a black hole with LinkedIn applications, unfortunately. That's not to say that having a LinkedIn profile isn't useful. Firstly, it can be useful because you want to come up in people's searches. So it won't always just be applying to things online, but sometimes, recruiters or businesses will be looking to engage directly with candidates. So if you come up in those searches by having a profile that's filled in with all your experience, that's useful. But also a lot of the time, as part of the interview process now, people will have a look at your LinkedIn profile. So even if you haven't found the job through LinkedIn, people may look you up on LinkedIn after you've applied via another means or been put forward by a recruitment agency or however else you're part of a process. People will look at that, and it can be viewed negatively if someone either doesn't have a profile. That can seem a bit strange, or if they have a profile that's incomplete or has errors on it or doesn't have a picture, that also can sometimes put people off. So I think you do want a good profile. It's not just about applying for jobs on LinkedIn. It's useful for other reasons.
Josh, what is a hidden job market, and how I can get there with my CV?
A hidden job market.
Yeah.
I mean, it may be referring to what jobs that aren't advertised. Do you mean? That can happen, I guess. A few of the roles we worked on won't be advertised, in which case it's best to be in touch with recruiters and to have registered with a few different ones, because sometimes it's like renting. A lot of the times you'll see a house and you call up and it's gone, or it's got 20 people, but actually if you're signed up with a few estate agents, one might call you and say, oh, I know you were looking for something 1,000 a day in Notting Hill or whatever. Here, well, that seems a bit unrealistic actually, but here it is, do you want to see it, before it goes out on their website. So I think, yes, there is an element of that, and the only way to be kept in mind, you know, by recruitment agencies is to be signed up with a few of them.
I promise my last question.
Okay.
So you just said about recruiters, recruiting agencies, and at the beginning you said that recruiting agencies is one of the ways how a lawyer can find a job.
Yeah.
The question, do I have to send my CV to different recruiting agencies, even if I don't see at the moment that they have a vacancy that is up to me? If I send my CV, I don't know, to 20, 30, 50 recruiting agencies, doesn't mean that my CV will be in the database.
It should be, yeah. I mean, if you speak to someone, then I imagine they'll be putting that on their database. I can't speak for every agency, obviously, but
Okay, for example, your agency. If you don't have the relevant vacancy for me, but if I see that, oh, this is recruiting agency who is looking for the lawyers, I should send my CV there. Maybe it should be in the database. So what is the chance that if I send my CV to your recruiting agency, what is the chance that it's gonna be in this database, and for how long it's gonna be kept there?
Yeah. So for us, it would be a case of, if someone sends their CV, we will speak to them and take a note of sort of what they're looking for, and then put it on the database so that we know what kind of things to reach out to those people about. If you just send your CV somewhere, I think unless you've heard back, it's safe to assume that it hasn't gone into some sort of database. But if you've been spoken to, someone's sort of found out, you know, what salary you're looking for, what area, what kind of positions, then you should be on a database that they can then reach out to you either through, you know, email or phone calls when something relevant comes up. So yeah, I think it's worth speaking to a few different ones. In terms of how long it's kept on the system, it depends on the agency, exactly the duration. I think we keep it for a year or so if there's been no communication within that year, or if there's been constant communication, then it'll stay on until someone asks to be removed.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Josh. Dear guests, do you have more questions? Well, I think that's no. So thank you everyone for joining this session. I'd remind you that we have a record of this session, and I will post it at our UBLN channel. Also, I'll put the link to this, not UBLN, but YouTube UBLN channel. I will put the link to this session at the poster that I made at LinkedIn at UBLN page. And I encourage you to join our next session that is going to be on the 11th of September. We will talk about how to chase your career with amazing speaker, John Javcock, who is CEO at Winmark. Thank you so much for this session, for being with us, and hope to see you again.
Thanks, Irina. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.